Hello, good evening, welcome to Hlspwnsworld, and tonight we're very quickly going to have a quick skim over Assetto Corsa Competizione. Now, I know this has been out for a while and a lot of YouTubers have already covered this in quite in depth. But the reason I'd only picked it up just last weekend is because I was waiting for the release of the VR version. Now, tonight, as it's already been covered mostly by other channels, I wanted to zone in on the difference between the 2D and the VR aspects of the game, and as this is early access, the current performance limitations between the both. Now, when I had a go on the game last weekend, I didn't get VR working till quite late on. So most of my time was spent in 2D, and I spent time racing in the Lamborghini. Tonight I'm going to be driving the Bentley Continental GT3, and we are racing on the Nürburgring GP racing track. Now, as I said, initially the game is starting off in 2D, but before we go into the graphical side of things and the limitations I think of racing in 2D, and I have to be honest, if anyone is thinking of releasing a serious racing game in 2018 or onwards, you have to have a VR implementation. But let's just go back to Assetto Corsa Competizione, or let's refer it to ACC for short. My experience with the game so far is that I think, and it's my personal own opinion, it's the best racing game simulator I have played yet today. Now, considering it's in early access, that is a lot to get excited about. Some of the key points I want to pick up is that there are marbles on the track. If you go offline, you lose a hell of an amount of grip. There is also a lot of slip on the curbs, and if you spin the tyres up on the curbs, the feeling of spinning and slipping and sliding off a curb and the way you go off a track, it seems to me more intuitive and more realistic than any racing game I've played so far. The force feedback feels good out the box, and the sounds, I think, are what makes this, the clinking, the metal sounds, the different levels of riding the curb. When you're immersed in this, it makes it a very, very believable racing game. Now, I'm not saying that Assetto Corsa or Project Cars, the two of the games I've played, are bad by any shape or form, but ACC seems to have lifted that bar once again. Now, very quickly, I want to talk about PC specs. My machine is quite beefy. I'm running a Ryzen 7 1700X. I've got a modest overclock of 3.9 GHz across all cores, but my graphics card is now 2 years old. It was the AMD flagship R9 Fury X. And in the current beta form of ACC, I can only run the 2D version at high settings. And even then, as you can see by my frame counter in the top left hand corner, my frames at times are dipping somewhat below 60, but at times above 60, and I can't remember if I've got 16 or 18 cars on track, but as the racing and the field spreads out, that frame rate pretty much keeps around 60. So if you've got a 2-year-old graphics card, currently in its current state, you'll be able to run the game in 2D with reasonable settings. And talking about 2D, I wanted to talk about, in my opinion, the limitations of 2D racing. Out the box, the field of view and the settings, that if you were just to turn up and play this at home or play at an event, especially in the Lamborghini, I felt that the track seemed very narrow. Because you're limited to your straight ahead view in the cockpit, it's sometimes difficult to get spatial awareness of the track, of hitting the apexes, and for seeing other cars around you. Now, I am racing this in 100% on the AI. I'm perhaps not up to 100% racing yet, and in 2D I really struggled. The amount of crashes, missed apexes, missed braking points, and I kid you not, to film this video it took me ages to get a clean attempt. And that wants me to bring up the limitation, in my opinion, of 2D racing. Now I know you can change the field of view massively, I know you can have a triple screens and they would all help, but in my opinion 2D racing is basically a massive uphill learning curve. There are people who are very good at 2D racing, but it does, to me, just doesn't come naturally. Now that we have VR, gaining VR is very intuitive. You strap the headset on and I drive as if I was driving the car in real life. In 2D, it's all, I'm not in the moment, I'm sat in a room with a racing wheel, looking at something on a screen. I get very detached from the 2D, sorry, 8,000 steps. I get very detached in the 2D view. And for me, I struggle so hard. And anyone coming to ACC who's perhaps not really got into sim racing before, I think will find it very difficult. Now, the graphics in the 2D do look alright. Obviously, recording, I'm playing this on the PC as I'm recording it with OBS Studio, and when I upload it, the YouTube algorithms do somewhat bring some of the quality down, so it does actually look better on my PC. But as we move on to the VR racing I'm going to be doing in a minute, do prepare yourselves, because to race in VR, currently you've got to remember this is a beta and it's in very early stages. So to race in the VR, I've really knocked all the settings down to absolutely as low as they can go. And even doing that, if you look in the top left hand corner of the screen, you'll see that the frames per second is only 45. So my Oculus headset is in asynchronous time warp. But I can tell you now, and this is God's honest truth, that what you're seeing on the screen is worse than I'm seeing in the VR headset. And although the frame rate had dropped to 45 and it's doing the asynchronous time warp, my opinion was, because they did do an update to the VR on Tuesday, and it's much improved, and the frame rate, although it's not 90, can't be far below, because I can tell when the headset's really struggling, and I never felt like that racing. To me, it was racing as good as the other sims that I've raced in VR. It certainly wasn't laggy. As soon as I moved the headset, it was moving about. So don't frown upon the frame rate up there. It was actually raceable. Some people can't cope with asynchronous time warp. For me, if it's just below 90 frames, say if I'm 70 or 80, I can more than cope with it. I don't have any issues with it, and I can race. Now let's quickly talk about the VR, because I am a firm believer, and I know some other YouTubers disagree. They don't think that VR makes you faster. And to be honest, thinking about it, VR doesn't make you. You don't strap a VR headset on and suddenly become Lewis Hamilton. But what VR does do for you, and this is over the 2D, straight away it is the immersion. It puts you in the car at the track. I'm no longer in a room with other people moving around me. I'm not looking at other I'm not... my spatial awareness is of the track. Now, in the Bentley Continental GT3, the headrest is right at the side of your head, so your view is somewhat limited to the left. But out the view of the car, your side glass on the side door, I can see the mirror, I can see everything. My peripheral vision in VR is far more than I can get for 2D. I can execute the apexes far better. I have far better spatial awareness of what's moving around me coming up the side of me. It's almost like when you're on a motorway and a car's in your blind spot, but you know it's there. VR gives you that sort of sense of view. Not only that, everything is bigger. It's like being in the car, and I think in VR, because things are bigger, everything, the movements, the car, the bouncing, everything is enhanced, and you draw it. I seem to draw more information. You've obviously got a better you've actually got a perception of depth, elevation. You can see things that you just cannot see in 2D. And that is why I think VR makes you faster, because it gives you so much more of an advantage. Now, if you've just been listening to me witter away, you've probably not noticed, but I'll put them up on the screen. The lap times I got in VR were about 2.5 seconds faster than I did in 2D. Now, to be fair, if I on the 2D practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, from using VR, learnt the turning points and started getting better with the braking points, perhaps I could match my VR times. But for just strapping the headset on, going to a new track and racing, I very rarely come off the track in VR, and I just brake intuitively. I don't pick braking points, I just do it. Everything about VR, it's like driving in the real world. You just drive. You forget about the driving aspect somewhat more than you do in 2D, as you do to concentrate more on the racing. Now, as you can see, racing at 100%, you've got to be pin perfect, and I'm too casual or too of an inexperienced racer to currently be smashing the opposition at 100%. But let's just compare. In 2D, the fact that I actually finished the race, I came last. In the VR, I finished in P13, and to be honest, if I hadn't been sloppy on some corners, I could have finished in 5th or 6th quite easily. But it's experience, and I need to stop being so casual and start getting into this more and more, because every time I do this in VR, I love it. Oh, just on screen there, I knew intuitively that he was going to go off at that corner, but when I saw him go, I didn't quite know whether to back off, keep my foot in it, and sadly I sort of followed him round, went off onto the slippier part of the track, missed the corner and got passed by 2 people. But I don't know what it is about ACC. The racing in this seems so much more realistic. The AI at the moment do seem to be doing some super moves, and in VR, if you've noticed, in the mirror, the car mirror on the car, cars are disappearing and reappearing. They're not walking in the game or anything like that, but they seem to disappear and then come back, as just happened. I've seen cars without wheels, but before everyone starts sounding off, this is early access. Well, this has been just a brief overview of ACC. I'm going to follow this more and more. We know that this is one of the first games that's going to have RTX ray tracing. When I do get a new graphics card, I'm excited about that, because that's going to bring even more realism to the game. Right, it's time to wrap this up. I've got to go. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Been not struggling with the content, struggling to get the videos together. Anyway, thank you for watching tonight, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Peace out.